Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's the In 11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. Arun Basuljevic is in the 11 this week, and he has a story. Arun Basuljevic is in the 11 from a Red Bulls. Arun Basuljevic is in the 11, a Red Bulls graduate, a Georgetown men's soccer program, alum, now currently with Monterey Bay FC, the newly formed expansion club in the USL Championship out on the West Coast. And that is just some of the highlights of his career thus far. He has had a number of stints in the USL, overseas. I don't want to give too much away because I want you guys to listen to this episode because it is going to be a good one. My only request for you before you continue on, if you like this episode, if you've liked a previous episode, if you have listened to any In the 11 podcast episode and you enjoyed the content that we provided you, please, whatever platform you're listening on, leave a rating and review, as it helps the show then reach those who have not yet discovered the In 11 podcast and who might enjoy it. So it helps the show grow. It helps the content get out there to more people, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Without further ado, I will stop yapping here at the top and kick it over to myself. All right, in the 11 now with us, Arun. I want to thank him so much for jumping on and sharing his story in the midst of a professional season. I know it's not always easy to find time to be able to do something like this, but I really appreciate it. I know that people will as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, man. Yeah, I've been looking forward to doing this now for a few months, so I'm happy to finally be able to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And tell the people a little bit about where you're kind of calling in from, where the situation is have you right now.
Yeah, so right now I'm in Monterey, California. I'm in the humble confines of my office setup in my garage. Um, but yeah, I've been out here now about 7 months, which is crazy. It flies by. But yeah, Monterey, California is a beautiful place to be, and today is actually an off day, which is why I'm able to have some time to talk and to share my story and to just kind of spill all the details that you're looking for.
Perfect. So a brand new club in the USL Championship, pretty much. What is that like, Monterey Bay FC? What's that like to be a part of a brand new club? Kind of figuring things out as they go throughout the season.
It's super interesting. It's my first time being part of a first year club. It's really another part of it is the last two teams that I've been on. One was Fresno FC and one was Oklahoma City Energy. Both of them kind of took what they called hiatuses. The
Hmm.
Oklahoma team, it remains to be seen whether or not they come back next season, but I think that's kind of the plan. And then Fresno is actually Monterey is like the successor to Fresno.
Okay.
So basically, the owner just kind of moved Fresno FC to Monterey. It's kind of where he's from. So I kind of knew about this project years ago. Um, Pandemic obviously slowed things down and probably stalled the progress of the stadium being built and certain things being built out for the club. But being here from the start has been really, really cool. I'll be honest with you. And when I first came here, the stadium which we play at now it was just dirt. There was no
Hmm.
stands, there was no video boards or no lights. And we first came, we are like, wow, they have a lot of work to do, and we're playing here. And at that time it was probably 4 months, and now it's one of the best stadiums in the USL. It's super niche, it's boutique, it's great atmosphere, and it's really a place that as players we want to play at a place that we look forward to every weekend, and that's probably the highlight of it. Just the fact that we're able to call that place home is great, and the community has really bought into it, and I think that's the coolest part. Every single month, every single week, it's like more and more people are recognizing us in the streets, in the gym, and it's you really get that sense that like it very much is a startup, but it is growing and it's kind of on this trajectory. So that's the coolest part, and that was kind of like the whole value proposition to me before I came out here. and it's been amazing, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was speaking to a player a few weeks ago. His name's Cam Vickerson, and we were kind of talking about how, at least in his career, he was also kind of evolving in his career while the USL was kind of figuring itself out, right? Because like over the past decade or so, obviously, I'm sure you know, it's been a bit of a figuring out process to figure out what the league situation is going to be, what the structure is, the divisions. There was obviously NASL at one point, and that folded. And as you just mentioned there's been teams that have come and go. What's that been like for you as a player to, obviously you've had a tremendous experience now so far in Monterey, but to also, while not only navigating something of a professional career, which is a feat in and of itself, but also kind of doing it in an ever changing landscape that is soccer in the United States right now?
It's an amazing question. Really, in my career, it goes all the way back to even before I went to college. I was playing in what they call the MLS Reserve League, and I'm sure Cam kind of touched on this because I know Cam actually.
Mm,
Back then, it was like there was no real connection between the USL and the MLS, and the academy of which I was growing up in was the Red Bulls Academy. And as they were kind of grooming guys for like the next level, there was what they called the MLS Reserve League.
hmm
And at that time, there was a couple of teams in the USL that were also taking part of that, and there were like a few handful of games that I played in, and a few of the teammates who I grew up with played in as well. And back then, I just remember like the whole perception of the USL was, to be honest, it wasn't great.
mm,
As guys coming up through the academy, at that age, probably 16, 17, 18 years old, college was still the much better option. And I think, obviously, there's not one shoe fits all. I think it still depends on your situation. But now the USL has become just a super viable option for players. And I would actually recommend that if you're a young player, and you're highly touted and you have a lot of talent and you want to go pro, I think you absolutely can find a good situation in the USL at this point because the level is very good. You're going to be challenged day in, day out. And I think maybe most importantly, the perception of the league has changed immensely. Where as the gap now between the MLS and the USL, and anybody will tell you this who's kind of been in the MLS or been in the USL and can compare it, it's a lot smaller than what it once was. Um, so I just think for me, it's been great to be part of it. It's been great to kind of grow within it, and hopefully there's still a lot more years and a lot more games to come. So yeah.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, kind of the same way that your club is trending in the right direction, I feel like the league is kind of as well. And I think, I mean, you could speak to this even better than me, but wasn't it just a few weeks ago there was like the record transfer? I think it was a center back out of Orange County that went to France, and last year there was a player from Louisville that went to, I think, like Real Sociedad, and so now
Mhm.
you have genuine interest from big time clubs in Europe that are going to pick out those younger players. And that's really what you're looking for, a league that can support players who maybe from the MLS are dropping down, and then also young players that are coming up. And it's a really viable platform for them to showcase themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we see that as players. We track all of this. It's kind of like we call it a players union. We support each other, and we understand that it is a daily grind. But the biggest thing with that is that there is so much opportunity now. I remember playing against the player who ended up going against who ended up going to Real Sociedad, and even in that moment, there was a lot of hype around this particular player, and um, the hype was real. He was a great player. He was young. He had a ton of talent, and now he's doing well over in Europe. And I think you're going to see more and more of that as time goes on, and not just Europe. You're starting to see more upward mobility within America, whereas you never really
Mm,
saw people leaving the USL to go to MLS. Like you mentioned, there was some people coming from MLS coming down to USL just for the opportunity to continue playing and things like that. But now you're starting to see MLS picking players from USL and bringing them up through the ranks, and I think that's huge for soccer in this country. And again, it just provides an unbelievable platform for us as players to perform and know that if we do well and we perform at a high level, there's gonna be fruitful opportunities at the end of it. So yeah, like you said, man, it's exciting. It's a super exciting time to be a part of it, and um, I never take it for granted. And I'm starting to see more and more players who have similar backgrounds they feel the same exact way. So it's cool, really, really, really cool to be part of it.
mm. You in your youth career, you were kind of in a situation where you were on that highest level platform, sort of, so to speak, in the United States at least. How did it come about to be able to join the Red Bulls Academy, and maybe talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you growing up?
Yeah, I remember. I was initially playing. I'm from New York, born and raised in New York, and I was playing at this premier club called BW Gotchi at the time. And the
Mm,
Red Bull Academy was very, very new. We had kind of heard about it, but we didn't know really what it would consist of. And me being young, I had no idea kind of what to expect. But my parents, they kind of thought it would be a better option for me because of the opportunity that it might provide down the road. On the other side of it, it was also it was free of cost, and at the time, there was one of the first academies or programs in the country that was doing that. So
hmm
looking back at it now, that was definitely a reason why they kind of pushed me in that direction to go and sign with the Red Bulls. And back then, I probably didn't realize how amazing that opportunity was. But as time goes on, I'm very, very thankful for it because I was able to, you know, create an unbelievable network of players who I've played with. I was able to, have a scholarship to one of the best programs in the country at Georgetown University. And then, eventually reach the paramount goal of signing for the first team, which I was able to do. So yeah, I think in the moment it's hard to kind of think long term, especially when you're a young player.
hmm
But now more than ever, I mean, I these these kids in these MLS academies, the opportunity that they have is incredible. I mean, it's on par with the clubs in Europe that we all know very very well. These clubs now in America are starting to be looked at the same caliber, and I think rightfully so. It was only a matter of time, and I think now it's starting to come to fruition.
Yeah. Was the pathway kind of there and visible for you when you were at the club, or was it still so new that it wasn't quite established in the same way? Like, was there that feeling within your team or within the guys that you were training with, like, okay, there's a real way for us to get into the first team here?
Yeah, it wasn't nearly what it is now. I think now
Mm,
Red Bull is notorious, for developing young players. It's kind of like the Red Bull way across their whole, um, all of their clubs around the world, and you see that. Whereas back then, when I was growing up, it was Thierry Henry, Tim Cahill, and guys like of this caliber who are probably at the later stages of their career, where younger guys are just never going to get an opportunity over these guys.
yeah.
But it was also the other side of that was that the opportunity that you got to perform in front of the top level universities and as a result kind of gain that scholarship was also another great value proposition as well. So
Mm,
back then, yeah, the professional pipeline wasn't nearly what it is now, but that's kind of what I was alluding to before with the USL. Now that that's kind of been integrated, I mean, you guys can sign for an MLS club and then just develop in the USL system, get real professional minutes, and really build up themselves to be ready for the MLS level. And I think it's a massive difference. I know now it's MLS Next, but the principles it remains the same. Playing professional games at a young age, there's nothing quite like it. So
yeah.
yeah, I
That's
wish
what I
I
was
wish
just
I
about
was
to.
a couple. Yeah, I wish I was a couple years down the road. I wish I kind of, uh, you know, mom. I could wish I was born maybe 2 or 3 years later. Probably would have helped, but it is what it is, and it's just cool to see the growth.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that though. Now it seems like just when we started to have a system a little bit, we kind of had to switch it up again and throw in MLS Next Pro. What do you make of? Because I believe Red Bull is one of the few clubs that has still remained in the USL Championship, right? And but most of the other clubs have now gone to MLS Next Pro. What do you kind of make of that division and that separation?
Yeah, I think there's a few things with that. I think the USL has kind of proven at this point that it can exist without MLS and their clubs. Whereas back in the day, MLS clubs, for example, the year that I signed with Red Bull, the season before, a few months before I signed, the Red Bull second team won the entire USL.
Mm,
You don't really see that anymore with the second teams that are still remaining in the USL. The competitiveness is not really there. The teams at the top are more the individual or the independent clubs, as you say, and uh, as a result, you kind of think, okay, the USL is starting to outgrow that that level of competition, and even when I was on some of the like, for example, when I was at Fresno, and even when I was playing with the USL team at Red Bull, we were one of the better teams in the league. And then at Fresno, for example, we were an independent club, and we knew that there were certain teams that we would play that were MLS 2 teams, that it was going to be a young team, and we would look at those games like, okay, these should be must wins. Whereas you don't really see that anymore. So I think for MLS Next, I think it's it's natural for the league to want to keep it in house for the development of the players that are in the MLS academies. But I absolutely still think that there's room for the USL to kind of do their own thing and grow, and for players to kind of choose.
Mm.
Maybe an MLS program is good for some, but maybe for others it's better to sign USL, and you might have a better minute pathway for minutes at a young age, and really that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key. What you just said there is that now that there's a couple different options that you can take, like there's a couple different paths. Whereas I think before maybe there wasn't really quite that autonomy that a player had growing up. There's really only one or two ways to kind of do it. For you, as you mentioned, though, kind of the way it was set up with your Red Bull team, a lot of players used that as a platform to get themselves in front of college coaches. And that was still at a time where that was kind of the route for a lot of players to go to the professional ranks. Did you notice that kind of amongst your teammates as well? Everybody was trying to kind of vying for that attention of those top Division 1 college programs.
Yeah, to be honest, yes, but we were just playing. We were
Mm-hmm.
young kids. We were just playing, and it was innate. It was just the fact that we were at these showcases. We were playing at high level academy matches pretty much every single weekend, and at the showcases and things like that. The coaches were there. They were watching, and I'll never forget. The first day or two of my junior year when colleges could actually reach out at the time. I don't know if NCAA rules are still the same, but there was just a flood of coaches reaching out, because that was like
Wow.
that was the date that they had to wait for. And at that moment I kind of realized, okay, wow, like the platform that Red Bull and the academy has provided it's real. And that was not only for me, that was just we had a great team, great program, and so we were seen in finals and playoff games, which obviously helped. But pretty much everybody that I played with growing up, now most of them are professional, and back then every single one of them went to a good Division 1 school. So so yeah.
So, what was your recruiting process then like, going from that first day where your phone is getting blown up to eventually then choosing Georgetown?
Yeah, it was I committed very, very early. I'll say that. It was like September of my junior year. Georgetown was one of the schools on the list that just made a ton of sense. It was relatively close to home. DC was beautiful, and it was actually the only school that I visited physically in person before I committed.
Wow.
So the process was cool, speaking with all the coaches, seeing what they had to offer. But I don't know, for some reason I just it felt right, committing to Georgetown when I did, and it was an amazing experience. And um, yeah, looking back, I have no regrets at all.
When you then go into Georgetown, obviously we can talk a little bit about, you had some individual success pretty early on, but as you mentioned or alluded to there a second ago, it seems like as I was looking through kind of the Georgetown rosters that you were in and a part of, like it's just loaded with guys that have gone on to have multi-year professional careers around the world. Did you kind of feel like, in a sense, when you went to Georgetown, you were already a little bit with a professional team now, kind of looking back at it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's kind of like, looking back now, it's almost took it for granted a little bit. Just the facilities, the little things that are taken care of, that the university takes care of, and our coaches and the supports, everything was an unbelievable precursor to actually becoming a professional. Because, like you said, it was pretty much a professional program. With the coupled with the fact that we actually had to do academic work as well. So yeah, some amazing teams, some amazing players, and even now, you look at the alumni that still come through that program. It's one of the best, if not the best, in the country.
Yeah. So, as you kind of look at yourself as a player, how do you think you were able to walk into that environment where there were all these, established and would then go on to be professional players and establish yourself right away and get minutes and get meaningful minutes that eventually, led to the success and accolades on your part?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think back when I was young at that age, the Rebel Academy and playing in those kind of like professional games with the MLS reserve games definitely set me up well. Because physically it was a little bit of a jump at the college level because you're starting to, I was 17 or 18 at the time. You're playing against 22, 23, sometimes, 24-year-olds if they're foreigners. As I'm sure you know, some foreigners come over a little bit later.
Mm,
So I was kind of maybe a little bit further along than some of my peers at the same age group.
mm,
But I think the biggest thing for me was just mentality. I was like, you know what? I'm coming to Georgetown. I'm gonna be the guy. I'm gonna win my spot, and I'm not gonna lose it. And it wasn't easy from the first week. I realized, wow, it's actually a much higher level than I probably initially thought. And I'm coming from a program and a team where I was, for lack of a better way of saying it, I was kind of like the guy.
yeah.
And at Georgetown, it's you start all over. Nobody cares where you came from. You got to prove yourself when you're there. So there's some people who kind of it takes an adjustment period to acclimate to that. Whereas for me, for whatever reason, I was just kind of able to do it pretty quickly and make my impact from the start. So um, yeah, back then I don't know if there was any one thing that separated me, but looking back now, I think it was my mentality.
Mm. In addition to winning that starting spot and establishing yourself in the team right away, did you also look at it as, okay, this is going to be my platform for how I'm going to get to the pro level one way or the other? And were you kind of looking at that from an early stage as well, like freshman and sophomore years too?
Yeah, it was, and I actually had the opportunity um, to leave after both years, both my freshman
Mm,
and my sophomore years, and again, it was still very, very early in the timeline of MLS and USL, and to be completely honest with you, I don't think I was ready to probably compete when I was a freshman or a sophomore with the big guys, but who knows, right? There's a lot of people who they're given an opportunity and they run with it. But we felt at that time, me and my family, that it was probably better for me to stay at Georgetown. And Georgetown took care of me. It was an amazing situation. There was no like imminent rush to leave.
mm,
Um, Looking back now, though, if you ask me, I would have left after freshman year and I would have taken my chances.
yeah.
But but yeah, but back then, like yeah, to continue on your point, it definitely was a platform. To show myself to not only to the Red Bull scouts, but the other professional scouts that were watching our games and things like that.
Was that the opportunity both freshman and sophomore years was to go and rejoin Red Bull, or was it elsewhere?
Yeah, it was only Red Bull because the MLS homegrown rule was as such that because I came up through the academy, I wasn't able to sign a generation Adidas. I wasn't able to enter the draft. I wasn't able to really go anywhere in America besides the team of where um, I was kind of raised. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that's still the same, but yeah, that was the only thing back then.
gotcha. But then after junior year, correct? Junior year was where we just couldn't hold out anymore. It's time to make the move.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I at that point I was ready. In my mind, I,
Mm,
I wanted to be professional. I was seeing, my peers, some of my peers at least, go professional, have some success, and I was starting to get that itch of like, okay, I need to be a pro. Like, um, it was nothing against Georgetown. It was just very much more me that I was like, I need to do this for myself. Um, so at that point, I was kind of, even though my parents probably, I think thinking back, I think they probably said, "Hey, why don't you just do one more year at Georgetown?"
hmm,
But but I was ready to go, and when the offer came, and it was to play. I saw that the USL team of Red Bull had just won, so I kind of felt a little bit of pressure. I was like, all right, I need to get into the system. And when the offer came, I said, yeah, I'm going to do it, and I did it.
yeah. And a quick no, I come across this. I wasn't sure if this. Did you also have a stint of training maybe in Europe or Norway or something like that while you were actually in school prior to going with the Red Bulls?
Yeah, I had a stint in Norway. I trained there for 2 weeks at Stabæk while Bob Bradley was the coach. I also did a stint in Belgium um, as well. And the reason for those training stints was kind of because I couldn't go anywhere else in America because of the homegrown rules.
Hmm.
I was kind of trying to see, what it was like in Europe. Maybe that would be a potential option for me to explore down the road. Um, so that was the reason for that, and it was set up through some agents and people that I knew who kind of hooked it up, and again, really really good experiences for a young kid.
How did that experience kind of play out for you? What feedback did you maybe take from the coaching staff, or what feedback did you take away from going in and into those training environments?
Yeah, that was probably the biggest like eye opener in terms of what being a professional really is. Like
Mm,
there's people see kind of the on-field product and everything that kind of goes on when you're actually performing and playing, but when you're not, you start to realize that you're very much alone. And when you're in a foreign country at a young age, it's a whole new thing. It's a completely different culture shock, and um, yeah, for me, I don't know. Back then, I always was loyal to Red Bull, and I wanted to complete that kind of that path of signing for the first team. Um, but yeah, the European journeys, those just kind of really opened up my eyes to also show me that there's so much quality out there. There was, these clubs weren't the biggest clubs, but the level of player were very, very good. And I
yeah.
think a lot of people who have played in Europe will tell you the same thing. And it was just an eye opener for me. And it made me more mature. It made me, I think, more ready for the professional game and the day to day grind. Um, and yeah, made me a better player.
Hmm. And I'm sure that kind of carried then into your first season once you actually go and sign that homegrown with the Red Bulls, correct? What was that first season like? I'm sure probably that moment of signing the contract probably had to be a surreal moment for you and your family.
It was. I'll never forget it. It was an amazing moment when Jesse Marsh called me and told me that they were going to sign me. I was ecstatic, and yeah, that whole year was, man, it went so quick, but it was an amazing year. I the kind of it was I felt a bit hard done by, and I could say that now because it's been a long time, but
Hmm.
kind of the plan coming in, I never really expected, or I was never really told that I was going to be, a member of the first team, and kind of push on to be a starter, because back then, like I said, the USL team had just won, so there was guys who uh, fully deserved an opportunity with the first team because they showed really well with the USL team.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was, a bunch of young midfielders at the time who were very similar ilk to myself, who, the club was pushing. For example, Tyler Adams, obviously look what he's done.
Yeah.
Sean Davis, who ended up becoming the first homegrown captain for the club. So there was a lot of, and other people in my position were the captain of the club at the time, Sasha Kleshtin,
Mm.
Felipe Martins, who's a veteran in MLS. So it was very, very difficult for me to kind of get a chance. So I fully was aware of that. And I thought I did really, really well with the USL team.
Mm-hmm.
Mid-season, I was up for Rookie of the Year. I was playing really well. I thought everything was going according to plan. And then yeah, sometime around the summer, it was weird. I got like a red card in one of the games. I thought it was a bit soft, but thinking back, it was probably the worst time to get the red card. And the team, I wasn't in the team for 3 weeks because I ended up getting a 3-game suspension. And by the time I came back, it felt like everything had changed. And I
Mm.
learned very, very quickly, because at the end of it, I was kind of, um, yeah, I was let go. I learned that that's that's the life of professional sports. Things can change in an instant, and yeah, and I was a living example of that.
Yeah. Are you maybe a little grateful that you learned it at that point in your career, like that? that kind of the saying of you're only as good as your next performance, right? Because I think it's a hard thing for players to learn because it's such a complete 180 mentality shift from when you're growing up in youth and even in college, really, to an extent, where when you get to the pro level, it's like you said, within 3 weeks, all of a sudden the complete picture in front of you had shifted and it had changed. The goalpost had been moved, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Even in that moment, right when I ended up coming back into the team and I was playing, I still thought I was playing well. I was competing. I kept a good attitude, but looking back after the fact, I realized, yeah, that was the moment where it all changed. And at the end of the year meetings, and everybody who's been in a pro team knows that you always have end of year meetings. There was nothing. There was nothing they could say negative about what I did. They just thought that um, I probably didn't fit the system in the same way they initially thought.
Mm,
But they offered to bring me back, but it was kind of like, I don't know. I felt a little bit um, slighted because I left college early to kind of to sign the professional contract
yeah.
with my hometown team. So I felt that way. But on the other side, it really made me grow up like in an instant. I was
Mm,
21 at the time, and I grew up massively in that moment where I was like, wow. Again, it was like one of those situations where it's like, wow, this is really what it is, and you can do one of two things. You can kind of cower and go into a comfortable place, or you can kind of spread your wings and try to make the best of the situation, which is what I tried to do. So yeah, there's good and bad, but I have no regrets, man. It's made me who I am today, and yeah, it's just part of the story.
yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's because I'm sure going into it, you're probably thinking this is where I'm gonna spend however many years of my career or something like that. This is where I grew up. This is the perfect kind of story for me to have, and it just changes quickly, and it's why I think I like doing these stories because everybody has such a unique path in this game, and there's no two players that you'll listen to that have the same path to be able to get to where you are. Even guys in your team right now, I'm sure it's like you listen to their CV, so to speak, and it's all
Yeah,
over the map from every walk of life. When
yeah.
you left Red Bull, did you have something kind of lined up for yourself already, or was it like taking a bit of a leap of faith to turn down that offer from them?
Yeah, so it was another. They had initially said we want to bring you back as a member of the second team,
Mm,
and for me, part of my rationale for leaving college early was okay. Like if it doesn't work out with Red Bull because I signed a 1 year guarantee, if it doesn't work out with Red Bull, at least I have the advantage on people who are my age that are going to be in the draft. I'll have a full year professional experience. I was highly regarded at the time in college, so my thought process was like, okay, if it doesn't work out with Red Bull, I can just go somewhere else. And as I mentioned, it's another learning process because I had an agent at the time who was kind of telling me the same thing and egging me on, like, yeah, something's going to come. Don't
mm,
worry. MLS team showing interest here, showing there. So I placed a lot of trust in this agent that something would end up coming to fruition, and I turned down a couple of opportunities at second teams uh, across the league where I don't have to get into the offers of what they were, but they probably would have been good opportunities for me. But I turned them down because of what I was being told in terms of like, no, an MLS deal is going to come, an MLS offer is going to come.
mm,
Long story short, never came. Middle of January ended up coming around, and at that point, I'm kind of like, okay, well, what the heck is going on? And made a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to Europe. And this is where I kind of leaned on my experience in the past, where I knew what Europe was. I kind of had a feeling of what the environment would be, and yeah, the agent at the time had a connection in Denmark, and I decided to hop on a flight to Denmark, and yeah, ended up signing there. So yeah.
mm. I've heard experiences with agents that have been amazing. I've heard the complete opposite as well. What would you maybe say to a young player out there? Obviously, I know that everyone's at a different stage in their career, so it's hard to give sort of one blanket piece of advice. But maybe a little tidbit of what they can sort of look for when trying to search for an agent, or what are the qualities that you want in an agent to be working for you?
Wow, it's an amazing question. I think you need somebody who's transparent, who's honest, and communicates in a really truthful way. Because if not, then you're kind of just uh, you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting for something to happen, and there's no guarantee that it ever will.
Yeah.
So you need a good person on your side who has connections and all of that, of course, but you also, as an individual, you need to take initiative yourself to kind of, push the envelope with this agent. And if they're not able to respond in a way that you think is beneficial to you, you're probably best off to find somebody else, because the way agents work is they're going to care the most about the guys who are bringing them the most business. That's just the nature of what it is. And back then I was very young, so I was probably naive and didn't really think about that.
Yeah.
Whereas now, very much, I understand that. Hey, listen, you know, life is what it is. And people need to make a living, and as a result, that's the business that agents are in. But as a player, you need to understand that that doesn't always help you, and it's not selfish of you to kind of go in a different direction if you don't feel you're getting the same guidance and care of that you need to be getting at whatever point you are in your career. So I know that's kind of, I beat around the bush a little bit, but that's the way I would describe it.
No, I think that's a perfect way to put it because I think, and I hesitate to just bash agents on here because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I would be even curious to ask you. I'm sure now you're at a point in your career where certain opportunities you could probably get for yourself just kind of based off of the network that you have in terms of coaches you've played for, teammates that you've played with, right? Whereas maybe an agent would help take a lot of the legwork off of your plate, but you could probably find an opportunity for yourself if you really needed to, just based off of the network that you've built over your professional career.
Absolutely. And yeah, at this point, you know, I know somebody pretty much on every single team, at least in the USL and even the MLS at this point.
Mm,
So the soccer world is very small, as I'm sure you know,
yep.
and you can always tap into those networks and people like that. But on the other side of it, it is still very, very competitive. And even though you know some people, it doesn't always mean that that's going to equate to an opportunity. Um, so I do think that having a good agent, uh, especially if you're young, is super, super important. It really, really is. So there's two sides to the equation. But yes, like you said, is if you've been in the league, if you've been around long enough, you do have a network that you can tap into for sure.
Mm. So, talk to me about the Denmark experience once you made it over there. When you maybe from when you first land to kind of was there a culture shock or did things go pretty smoothly right away?
Major culture shock.
Mm.
And I don't want to continue to bash on the particular situation, but when I showed up, I was under the impression that this is going to be a great opportunity. That I was, it's a done deal. I'm going to sign. Everything's great. Long story short, I showed up in Copenhagen. The team was called Frema Ama, and the yeah, to put it shortly, the coach didn't even know my name, didn't know my position, and there was no contract waiting for me. So,
Oh my
but I
god.
was already there, and at this point, it's the end of January, early February. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna make this work. I came out here with the intention of being here anyways. Like, it doesn't really change much for me. Ended up turning into about a 2 week or a week and a half trial where I had to kind of prove myself. I was playing all different positions. Those who know me know that I'm not a defender, but I was playing right back in certain moments, because that's just the grind. You're there at a foreign club. Most people spoke English, but in Denmark, I found that they like to speak Danish.
Yeah.
Um, so it was very, very difficult, and I had to prove myself. And I ended up signing a 6 month deal just because at the time the club that I was with, they were in the process of being sold. So the owner at the time wanted, it was all short term. Everything was short term, which was, it worked for me because I didn't know if I wanted to be there long term.
Mm.
So the 6 months I signed, and yeah, I played a half season there. And the biggest culture shock for me there was the fact that the team that I was with was fighting like a relegation battle.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's a whole different level of stress, and you see it weighs on the coaches, the players. And again, it was just another moment, another time period where I I grew massively, and probably wasn't the best footballing experience, but in terms of maturing, it was probably the best experience of my life.
Did the relegation battle really have an impact on the training environment week in and week out? Because I remember I was speaking to a player in Germany who was talking about this and was at a in a club that was about to be relegated, and like at one point near close to the end of the season, where it was like a must win game, the captain had kind of gone around to everybody and been like essentially saying like, listen, like if we don't win this, like I'll be okay. I'm the captain, right? But like you're gonna be gone. You're gonna be gone. It kind of it became a very cutthroat sort of environment, and I've heard stories that it can be similar in any situation where you're fighting for relegation and fighting for a lot of people's livelihood.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many stories like that. Every single day, literally at training was a war, and it came from the top down because the coach felt a ton of pressure to kind of keep the team up.
Mm-hmm.
And it trickled down to the players who had been there, for a while. And there's real consequences when you factor in relegations, and obviously there's real benefits when you're on the other side and you're being promoted. But when you're fighting relegation, every single day is that much more stressful. Every single game, every single moment, you can't make mistakes because those mistakes are magnified and they could be extremely costly. And another side of it is it's very, very hard to build trust with the coaches. If you make a mistake in a moment when the team can't afford it, you might not see the pitch for 2 3 months, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it's a whole different outlook at the end of the season for yourself. So yeah, it's similar to like you said about the guy who was in Germany. I There's a lot of situations that I went through in Denmark that were right in line with that for sure.
Mm. So what was the outcome of that season? Were they able to stay up? Did they go down?
No, we stayed up. We stayed
Wow.
up. The coach still ended up not resigning.
Mm.
He ended up not keeping his position. There was a whole wholesale of changes. It was a completely new team. A couple months later, when they ended up selling the club, and they completely changed the entire team. So yeah, um, that was kind of the end of that story.
Mm. Just I guess out of curiosity, and obviously I know the answer because you know I love the game just as much as the next, right? But like I think for people out there who are maybe listening and you're describing your first experience at Red Bull where it's difficult, right, to say the least, and then going over to Denmark, kind of same thing, and it's a there's so much culture shock. It's a different language. It's a difficult work environment that you're going into day in and day out. Like what is there ever a moment of like, ah, oh, man, maybe pro soccer isn't quite what I thought it was going to be when I was coming up through the academy or playing in college? Like is there ever a moment like that for you when you're in those kind of difficult times maybe early on in your career?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's natural. I think, yeah, when I was alone in Europe, it was the sacrifice of, the time and the energy that was being spent out there. It was inevitable that I was going to have those thoughts, but I still, had the dream, and I still believed in myself as a player. And I guess my mentality just from a young age was to always keep pushing.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I'd be lying if I said that it was easy, and then I was just always able to be positive because anybody who's been in similar situations I would say would tell you the same thing, that there's always thoughts like, man, is this worth it? I'm away from my family. I'm away from my
mm,
friends. These are probably some of the best years of my life. But when you look back on it, and for me, in that moment, I probably didn't feel the way I do now about it. But when I look back on it now, I'm like, I'm so thankful, so thankful for that experience, and I think it served me well moving forward in my career, and I think it'll also serve me really, really well, later on in life. So, yeah.
yeah, because it put you in so many situations where you were, forced to be uncomfortable and just figure out a way to find a solution that was going to work for you. I highly recommend to a lot of people to have an experience where you can, you know, at the very minimum travel, but if you can live outside in a different country, I think huge. And obviously, football provides that vehicle for guys like us and for many others to be able to do something like that. I think it's huge. And it sounds like it that kind of transitioned you into another European stint where you went over to Sweden after Denmark.
Correct. Yeah, I had a coach in Sweden who he was from New Jersey actually, and it was he heard that I was in Europe and I was in Scandinavia and kind of reached out and and it was so quick because it was right there. Sweden was uh, just a couple of hours away, and he asked me, if I wanted to come out and join him. Um, and at the time, I was weighing a couple options with, again, it was a second team in MLS with a team in Canada that I was weighing, or it was staying in Europe. And I just felt at that point, I still had a little bit more to prove. And a lot of the opportunity that he pitched to me was the ability to play in the Swedish Cup. And in the
Mm,
Swedish Cup, we were playing against first division teams from Allsvenskan, and it was only going to be for 4.5, 5 months. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go and do it. I was still 22 at the time, and the coach, like I said, I kind of had that connection with him because I'm from New York, he's from New Jersey, and again, that was a different experience, but still a really really a good one. And I think an important thing to mention here is like there's a lot of American players who, at this point now, it's like you see so many of them going over to Europe and they're going to these
mm,
big leagues, and it's the pathway for them is a lot probably more cushiony than it was years ago. It was a lot harder to get into these situations, but because of the respect of America now in world football, these young players are getting these opportunities more, and as a result they're compensated as a way where like the sacrifice isn't the same as somebody who's not being compensated at the same levels of these top leagues, right?
okay.
So yeah, like the commitment and the sacrifice is exacerbated for people who are in the second divisions of these countries, just for as an example.
Yeah.
So it was difficult. Again, that just leads you to be so much stronger because I was literally just fighting for opportunity to prove myself, and to hopefully get seen by, a bigger club and to continue on and moving up. So, um, yeah, that's kind of what led me to Sweden.
And you don't have to get fully into any details if you don't want to, but can you put into a little bit of context what some of these deals kind of look like? Maybe for a second division or a third division in a Denmark or Sweden or a place like that, just to kind of understand for a young player that's out there and maybe has an opportunity like that upcoming, what they're really getting themselves into, kind of from the financial side of it, or what they're going to be compensated for.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It does range. It does range, but you're looking at anywhere a few $1,000. When sometimes they include apartment and food and things like that. There's some little perks, and there were some players who I know personally who was less than that. So it
Hmm.
really kind of depends on your agent. It depends on um, your experience and things like that. But even at somebody would say, "Oh, that's not too bad of a level of a contract." It's like, well, is it worth being over in Europe, um, sacrificing for your dream, and being away from everybody for that level of compensation? And you really have to, again, in that moment, look at things bigger picture and say, "Is this really what I want?"
Yeah.
And if it's not, then don't even waste your time to do it because it's not as glamorous as some people would say. Um, but if you do believe in yourself and you do want to try something new, I'm a huge believer in it. I think it's absolutely worth it. So it just depends on the situation.
Yeah, completely agree. Did you always look at Europe as kind of, I want to see if I can get to the highest level in Europe, or did you also maybe look at it of like, I want to build a resume for myself and then see if I can kind of bring that back to the States and reintegrate myself in the United States system?
Yeah, back then I think the idea was when I left America, I was like, okay, I'm gonna move up the ranks in Europe. I'm gonna do
Mm,
whatever I can, and I'm gonna stick it out. I'll be, I'll make it work. And Denmark, the footballing side, there was so many things that out of my control that didn't end up being that.
mm,
Whereas Sweden, very much, I was considering on staying in Sweden. at the conclusion of the 5 months, I had some cool opportunities in Sweden um, to stay there, and I also had an opportunity to come back to America to play for what at the time was Fresno FC. So I had some decisions to make. I did well in Sweden. I thought I showed really well, and I still have a great relationship with the coach who's still over there now. So I would never say no to going back potentially, but
Mm,
yeah, when the decision came to come back to America or stay in Sweden, I think at the time, um, I was 23 years old. I saw the kind of the progression of the USL at the time and how it was growing, and I figured, okay, well, I've been gone out of America for a year. Um, Even though I like Europe and the opportunities here might be really good for me down the road, I think it's time. I think I should go back to America and kind of prove myself again there, remind people of the player that I am. So I ended up taking the Fresno FC offer.
mm. Real quick switch up on that weather too, I'm sure, from going from Sweden out to Fresno.
Yeah. Oh, big difference. I mean, when I was in Sweden in the summer, it was beautiful. Same in Denmark.
Mm.
Scandinavian summers are great, but man, the winter is brutal. I'll never. I just gotta chill thinking about it. But yeah, some of those winter trainings, those aren't fun.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so then that first season back in the States, what is that like to be a part of a club like Fresno, and now you're back in the States where you kind of got your start from, had some time away. Did you notice any difference in your game a little bit after going to Europe and experiencing different football and different football cultures?
Yeah, at that point I was fully a man. At that point I was fully ready for the demands of what I would say like a full professional season would be. Mentally, I was the strongest I've ever been, and I was really just on a mission to prove myself to everybody, and
Mm,
also to myself, right? And I went to Fresno not really caring who was there, who was in my position or anything like that. I just went with the idea like, okay, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna really do my thing, and I'm gonna have a great season, and it's gonna propel me back to the MLS, and I'm gonna be flying. Because at the time I was still 23 years old, um, and I figured, you know what, I'm still young enough where I can do it, so I'm gonna do it. And yeah, I can continue going. I don't know if you have any more questions in terms of like the beginning of my time at Fresno, but um, it was shaping up exactly the way I wanted it to. We
mm,
were one of the best teams in the league. I was playing almost every single minute. One of the better players on the best team in the league, and I was 23 at the time. And I was flying, man. I was doing really really well. And again, just another tough situation around August of that year, so a little bit past the halfway point. I We were playing Las Vegas in Fresno, and I had a major injury on the pitch where I broke my ankle and
oof,
obviously derailed my season at the time. I had MLS looks. There were trials that were potentially being lined up and things like
mm.
that, um, because I was doing really really well. Sure enough, when you get injured, obviously those things get put on the back burner. So yeah, it's a sad ending to that, but yeah, that was kind of the Fresno FC situation.
I think anyone who listens to this podcast understands this, as most players will reiterate this point. Can you speak to it all, just like the kind of roller coaster that is the profession that you are in going from an experience that left a little bit to be desired maybe in Denmark, and then a little bit better in Sweden, coming home to Fresno, and you're balling out and you feel like you're on top of the world, and then boom, you come right back down again with an injury. Like, what's that like to have to ride that roller coaster kind of?
Yeah, that was the toughest moment of my career, and it's hard to kind of put it into words because it felt like all of the work that I put into that point, it was kind of for nothing because um I was very, very positive. I was still very um, what I thought young in my career, and I was still super hopeful that I could go on and push to the MLS in that moment. And when you get hurt like that, I'll never forget coming out of uh, the surgery, and just when I ended up getting the cast getting taken off and the boot taken off, and I was just looking at my leg, and I was like, "Whoa!" Not only do I not like I don't know if I like if this is ever going to be better. Like it was that you anybody who's had a big injury will probably tell you the same.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like a super somber moment. And again, I was 23. I was away from my family on the complete opposite side of the country in
Mm.
California, and the reality set in. And the team was great for me in the very beginning. And but when you're doing the rehab and you're home alone in your apartment, you're by yourself.
Yeah.
You're very much on your own. So it's tough and it is a roller coaster. But if it's what you love to do, and you do it. So yeah.
So I have to imagine there was a little bit of a period of kind of, I guess, mourning or just sadness while you're kind of in the beginning of that recovery phase. And then were you able to just kind of flip the switch and jump right back into, okay, let me hit the PT as hard as I can and try and heal this as quick as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I that was kind of my goal. And the other side of it is, I was on a 1 year contract at the time.
Mm,
And I was like, well, again, the realization set in, well, if I don't show that I'm healthy, um, I might not get re-signed. They might think I'm not available to play. So I literally, I became obsessed with just recovering as quickly as I possibly can, as I possibly could at the time. And I progressed really, really quickly. So, and then the other side of it is later on in my recovery, we heard that Fresno FC was going to be folding.
oh,
So now in my mind, I'm like, wow, the team that I just got hurt for is gonna cease to exist next year. So any team that I might go to after this, like the only thing that they're gonna remember of me is the fact that I snapped my ankle a month and a half ago.
yeah.
They might not know if I'm healthy. All of the work that I put in this year, is it gonna, what's gonna happen?
Mm,
So, like I said, I became obsessed with kind of the PT, and I had an amazing group of physical therapists that I work with in Fresno. Um, and long story short, with the bone injury, it's a little, people might be like shocked at this, but I got hurt around August 3rd of 2019. And then I played in the last playoff game that we had at Fresno. We played El Paso. I literally got like 5 minutes in the game. I was definitely not close to ready, but I just pretty much faked that I was, just so I could show people that I was back on the field, that I was healthy, and I was gonna be fine, because I
yeah.
was doing it with the longer term, like mindset, like okay, I just want to show people that I'm back, I'm here, like, and then hopefully something comes to fruition. And um, so yeah, I ended up coming back and playing that game. I believe it was the very last weekend of October, maybe the first weekend of November. So very, very before schedule. It was barely 3 months
Yeah.
after breaking my ankle. So yeah, it was pretty crazy, but I felt that I had to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure like you said
Yeah,
there's that pressure of like as you go into an off season where you're trying to speak to clubs and get in your next opportunity, it's like no, look, I am healthy. I played this game and they don't need to know like all the details, they don't
right,
need to know that your doctor had actually maybe not cleared you quite just yet.
right.
Cuz it's scary. It's like I just talking to a player and it's like it now becomes kind of like your body, if you're healthy, that's how you make your money. And if you aren't healthy, if you aren't eligible to be picked on the weekends, then that affects what you can make. That affects your living and your standard of living, and it can sometimes be a scary thing. I mean, I have to imagine, an injury like that when you're playing at that level has to be kind of a scary thing when it first happens, for sure.
Massively, massively. And yeah, like I said, I grew up so much in Europe that when that moment happened, the realization set in, like, wow, like this is, these are those, this could be very well one of those stories where, we all hear about, the stories where somebody gets hurt and then like you don't really hear about them again. And I
Yeah.
just refuse to let that kind of be me. Um, so yeah, again, just another situation that I guess, hardened me up. That made me a little bit more, a little bit stronger mentally. So yeah.
100%. So what was the lead up then to finding a home in Oklahoma City?
Yeah, so um, the when my team, so I got hurt that on in August, and then my team Fresno FC, they went to Oklahoma City the next weekend to play against the Energy, and they came back and there was a card for me from one of the members of OKC, and turns out that uh, it was Porig Farrell, who he's now with Colorado Rapids, but he was working with the Energy at the time, and he knew me back from my days playing with Red Bull, and because he was working in Pennsylvania, which is it's a small soccer world again.
Yeah, so
so
small.
so small. So yeah, he just shot me a text on a whim after the season, and asked me what my situation was like. I initially was heading to San Diego, Loyal. It was going to be their inaugural season, and I was going to be heading there with a few other Fresno guys actually. But it was just kind of like a verbal commitment,
Hmm.
and we call him Patty. He kind of came through. He texted me, and I'll never forget. He sent me that card that when I initially got hurt. So when he texted me, I was very much there to listen to him,
Mm.
just out of appreciation. And long story short, the Energy was super keen on getting me to sign with the club. They offered me a 2-year contract. And again, coming off an injury of which I just had, for them to show that level of commitment to me um, was huge. And even though I was thankful for the opportunity to actually go to San Diego as well, I thought in that moment I can't turn down this 2-year guarantee. So it was a very kind of quick, literally me and Patty just texting back and forth about terms and things like that, and it was done within a few days. And ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to Oklahoma City. Never would I have thought I would ended up in Oklahoma City, but sure enough, I did.
Because how much do relationships like that play a factor in a professional career? Like going with somewhere where you feel valued and wanted, and like you have a close relationship with, whether it be a coach or a staff or teammates. Like how much does that play a factor for you in kind of choosing where you want to play?
It is big. It's definitely big. I felt that from the beginning with OKC. I felt that it was like a family environment. There was just really good people at the club, and that is so important. It's so important. And I've ran into so many bad actors within my career who I don't have to get into names and things like that, but
Yeah.
everybody will probably say the same thing. But in Oklahoma City, I can honestly say there was everybody there was just top notch, just stand up human beings, and um, those are all relationships now, even to this day, that I continue to think that it's very very strong, and I can pick up a phone and call any of them at any time, and even before we remove soccer out of the equation, I think we're friends and we have a longer um, relationship even after soccer is long gone. So um, it definitely plays a big factor.
Yeah, does that factor? Is it one of the things? Because I was curious. I wanted to ask you. You've played with so many players throughout your career, and like you've mentioned before, your network is big in the sense that you've know someone on almost every team, but also kind of as we mentioned, the soccer world is so small that it seems like everybody knows everybody once you get to a certain level. What are the
Yeah.
things that you feel like you've noticed of players that have gone on to have careers like yourself or longer careers at the elite level? What are some things that you have maybe picked up along the way that like pretty much everybody seems to have, this level of professionalism or what are some things that you just notice are common themes in professionals that you see in a day in and day out basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost is everybody, once you reach this level, has talent in
Hmm.
one way or another. There's something that got them to this point. You don't, in college, there's always a player that is a walk on, or maybe is they did great in school and they played soccer as an extracurricular, so they're on the team kind of just based on the nature of that they played, and they need to fill up roster spots, but they're maybe not quite at the standard. So there's that in college, but once you get to the professional level, you really don't see that. Literally everybody across the board you could look at and say, okay, there's a level of talent here. Um, so that's the first thing, and then I would say the second thing that I've seen is that players really are passionate about the game.
Mm,
Um, so again, maybe in college it was probably you saw players that they had other interests and things like that, which is completely normal and it's fine. But at the professional level, you see, I wouldn't go far as saying it's an obsession, but for some people, it absolutely is an obsession.
yeah.
Um, but there is a higher level of just like commitment to the craft, of just day in, day out, taking care of the body. What does the coach want? Watching film, putting themselves in the best possible situation to play on the weekends. All of those things you kind of do see across the board. And the players that I've known that have been in the leagues the longest, they are like the standard bearers of that exact mentality of literally doing everything that they can to perform on the weekends. And I think you need to. I absolutely think you need to be that way.
On the flip side of that, have you seen players that have kind of not dedicated themselves to the craft in the same way, and then that led to an early retirement or falling out of the game as well? Or are there things that you see on the flip side of it that lead to a player not really getting that same lengthy career?
Yeah, it's the margins are so small in terms of getting signed or not getting signed professionally, and then
Yeah.
obviously extending it as long as you possibly can. But I know so many unbelievably talented players that never made it pro. Never
Mm.
mind playing multiple years. So uh, yeah, I don't know if there's one way to describe it, but a lot of things do need to align for the opportunity to come to fruition. But I find that if you have the talent and you do the quote unquote right things off the pitch, and you leverage any network that you have, I think you'll be successful. Um, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I think as we were kind of going along your story there, I think it brings us to present day with Monterey. And I know we've spoken about it a little bit, but just again, what's that project been like of being part of a new club, and how has the season gone so far for you and for the team?
Well, it's been super cool to be here. Obviously, I have the context of Fresno FC before here, um,
Mm,
and Fresno was an amazing experience for me soccer wise, regardless of the injury.
yeah.
So coming out here and kind of seeing a lot of the same faces, um, in term not on the team. There's only one other player, but like front office and people who are running the club. It's cool to see how they've taken things that they've learned from Fresno and kind of implemented it here. And I would say honestly, it's definitely a step up from Fresno and just in how the club is run. So that's really cool. And yeah, even in that time frame, the league has grown so much. So the standard across the board in terms of players, in terms of facilities, everything has just gotten better. Um, so to do it with this group of people and to do it here in a beautiful place like Monterey, California, it's just been fun, man. It's not been the best season collectively or individually, um, but it was always going to be difficult. When you're at a league of this caliber and you're
Mm.
starting completely brand new, it's tough. It's very very tough. So, but we still have a lot of time. We have a lot of time to turn it around, and we're hopeful that we can do that.
Yeah, as you just mentioned, there's a whole half season still to play, lots to play for. What are the kind of the things that you look towards for the rest of this season as some of the goals that you have your sights on, and maybe even then beyond that, what are some of the things that you're still looking to accomplish within your career within the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, this year is just getting healthy, remaining healthy, and playing as many games and minutes as I possibly can for Monterey Bay. Um, Other than that, I would love to play overseas again,
Mm,
to give it another real proper go in a situation where I'm probably way more ready now than I was back then. Way more of a seasoned vet, as some would say, where I think I would adapt just a little bit better. So I would love to do that again, and then I would love to play back in New York, for one of the teams there, or any new teams coming, whatever it might be. I would love to play back home, um, down the road. So yeah, so that's long term. Short term is do as well as we can here with Monterey Bay FC. I love playing in front of our fans at the new stadium. It's great, and there's a lot of home games left because the first 7 games of the season this year we were on the road, so we have a lot of home games to look forward to. So I'm looking forward to that, and yeah, at the end of the season we'll see where we're at, and we'll kind of go from there. So that's what's at the forefront of my mind.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, I've got two, but they're just real quick ones before I get you out of here because I don't want to take up too much of your off day.
yeah,
Um,
man.
First of all, how's our boy Chase Boone doing out there in Monterey as well?
Yeah, he's not doing so good, to be honest with you. He's just nah. First and foremost, Chase is probably my best friend on the team. Gravitated towards each other from the beginning of the preseason here in Monterey, and man, he's doing amazing. I think the statistics show that, but I see how he takes care of himself on a day-to-day basis, and he's one of the players who I was alluding to before in terms of doing all the little things off the field to provide himself with success on the pitch. He's doing it, and he's doing great up to this point, and yeah, we still have so much to go. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what else he can continue to do.
Good. Yeah, because I know he had a huge injury a couple years back as well. So it's nice to see him recovering from that and kind of getting back into full force.
Yeah.
The last one, I came across this and it was a random piece of information I found in kind of researching for the episode. But were you a New York State chess champion?
I actually
Wow.
was. Yeah, back when I was 6 or 7 years old. Yeah, I can still play. I'm still pretty good, but yeah, back in the day, I was very, very good. So that is a true fact. That's always like my fun fact whenever I go somewhere and they're like, "Tell me something about yourself you don't know," and nobody ever believes me.
Has anybody on the team gotten the work yet in chess or no?
Uh, Actually, no, not on this team. No, not on this team, but previous teams, yeah, previous teams was like, all right, we'll play. And sure enough, I beat them. So
Yeah.
yeah,
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing the story. It was a lot of fun.
yeah, man, I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
That's going to do it, guys, for this week's episode. I want to thank Arun once again for stepping into the 11 with us this week, sharing his story, sharing some of his thoughts on what the U.S. professional soccer landscape looks like now and what it could look like in the future. Always like to talk the future of the game. If you didn't do it at the top right now before you leave, please make sure, if you listened this far to the episode, leave a rating and review on the podcast, on the show, as it helps reach those who have not yet discovered In the 11. I would greatly appreciate that. Yeah, that's really all there is to it for me. We got more episodes coming. We got more guests coming. We've got, at this point, we're racking up the number of players that we have, in terms of a player that you might want to look at for the blueprint of how to forge your professional soccer career, your college soccer career. We've got coaches, we've got directors, we've got pretty much everything that you could possibly want when you're looking at the professional soccer scene or how to get to the next level in the game of soccer. So I would encourage you to go check out some of those episodes, but I appreciate you very much for listening to this one, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.